Hello, everyone. So, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of extinction and a handful of other things in this presentation. So, just to give you a little bit of context, we have two different types of extinction that we need to understand. The first is background extinction. This is relatively constant rate of extinction in the fossil record. And one of the reasons that species would go extinct, here and there is, just that's kind of how evolution works, right? So in survival of the fittest, some species might be naturally selected against others. So having a few species die is normal. A mass extinction is when you're having a major loss of species, typically during a relatively short amount of time. And we'll talk about some of those historical mass extinctions that you've probably heard of. So again, just a couple details between the two of those. So the background extinction is it's considered background extinction if it's between 3 and 30 per year. So it's still a lot. 30 species per year is still, I think, a lot. But the pathway is natural, right? So two bacteria that are vying for the same food and one beats out the other and the other one dies off. That's just what happens. Mass extinction, and there have been 5 confirmed mass extinctions. We'll talk about the maybe 6th one. And we're talking about thousands per year. So rather than 3 to 30, we're talking thousands of species per year. These are caused by a dramatic environmental change. And we'll talk about the 2 main ones, but definitely environmental change is what we're looking at there. We're talking about a high number of species that are being lost during these mass extinctions. So an average species will last about 4 million years on Earth, on average. Of course, that's just an average, right? So we need to look at how long humans have been around, and do we think we can survive 4 million years? I'm not sure we can, but I guess we'll figure it out later. But that's the average, pardon me. That's the average, 4 million years that a species will exist. Many are much shorter, some are much longer. So scientists believe that typically in the past, asteroids and or climate change have caused Earth's mass extinctions. So asteroids, climate change, sometimes really, really specific volcanic eruptions have caused those events. Yes, those are hypotheses, but many of them make sense with evidence that scientists have found. So 65 million years ago, this is probably the one that's most relevant to people. That's the large asteroid that hit the Yucatan Peninsula, and that's when all the dinosaurs species went extinct. So that's probably the most famous one, or at least the one that most people know about. So there's a little image of T-Rex running from the asteroid hitting. And thousands of species of trilobites, for example, used to exist, but now all we have is fossils, and a ton of fossils. So they were really, really prevalent. Wow, I cannot talk today. And now all we have left is fossils. So we definitely have the evidence that certain species existed and then went extinct. So, in terms of looking at this diagram, I do not think it's something you need to memorize. This is just to give you a little bit of context. So, you can see here, down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 extinction rates before our current time, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So and they're all kind of in bold over here. Again, I don't think it's something you need to memorize, but the bold ones are actually the extinction events. Little fun fact: we think of Jurassic as the dinosaur era, but really was the Cretaceous area. I think maybe Jurassic Park did that to us, because maybe Cretaceous Park just doesn't sound quite as cool. But really, the Cretaceous era was when the dinosaurs ruled. And that was a big extinction event 65 million years ago as well. Some of these are bigger than others. So the Ordovician, and I'm probably saying that wrong, 50% of all animal families were gone by then. So that was a pretty big one. The Permian was another big one. So 50% of animal families and 90%, 95% of marine species specifically. So almost wiping out all of marine species. So just kind of interesting to see. We have a little bit easier evidence, I think, of some of our animal species. That's why this is very much more focused on that, rather than always many trees. It's a little harder to track that record. So I think that's why its focus is a little bit more on animals. And we're going to come back to this. But the current extinction crisis, the one that we're seeing right now, is 100% caused by humans. All of the rest of these were natural disasters, a natural occurring climate change, a volcano erupting, an asteroid hitting. None of the other mass extinctions, obviously, were human caused based on the fact that we were around 65 million years ago or before that. But the fact that a species is causing the other species decline is very scary. So, just a kind of a little timeline of those five events that we talked about. Again, not something that you need to memorize, but the numbers of families living at the time. So you can see these really big dents, and wow, this one was really huge. So just to keep that in mind. So, kind of switching gears a little bit, this is the ancient human migration. This is the most scientifically sound theory on where all humans came from. It's called the out of Africa model. And literally, it's exactly what it sounds like. We believe, that most scientists believe, that most humans came out of Africa. So, it's kind of color coordinated, the dark blue, 60,000 years ago. And then you get to this kind of greenish color. You're looking at 50 and 40,000 years. And then when it comes over to the North America, you're really talking within the last 10,000 years that you've had any species, any human species, Homo sapiens, in this area. So the out of Africa model. So we're babies in terms of the evolution on the planet for sure. So even our ancestors hunted species to extinction. So there's just a handful on here. Again, not something you need to memorize or anything like that. But these are some species, pardon me, that we help to eliminate by hunting, by using them for meat or whatever. Again, just kind of a visualization of some of the species that we have eradicated. And then just to think about, like, okay, so let's say, in North America, 72% of the large mammal genre were killed 10 to 11,000 years ago. That Think about how us eliminating mammals by hunting may have affected many other species in those areas as well. Because again, some ecosystems are really dependent on one species. And if it was that mammal that we killed off, if that was keeping all the grasses at, bay or whatever, then we've maybe affected a lot more species than we thought we did. So the problem is that we're kind of going through the sixth great mass extinction right now. And again, we think that this is the first time that it's because of a species and not a natural occurring event like volcanoes or asteroids or whatever. And according to several scientific studies, and of course these are guesses, but the approximation is that we're losing 27,000 species per year. So reminder that 3 to 30 species per year is background. So the normal expected is 3 to 30, and we're talking 27,000 per year. That's pretty significant. Just to give you a little bit of perspective of what that looks like, that's 75 species lost every day, 3 every hour. So in my class period, 3 species have just gone extinct. Once every 20 minutes, we're losing a species of animal or plant or bacteria or fungus or whatever. And we're kind of the reason, right? So that's the problem. A couple examples of species that we have kind of accidentally killed off or sometimes purposefully. The dodo bird was a flightless bird that was exterminated by early humans. So we just kind of have pictures. I don't know necessarily the story, if they were a pest or whatnot, or if it was for sport or for game. This is an extinct dog. I don't know much more about it than that. It's crazy. That's a dog. To me, it doesn't look like a dog. Passenger pigeon, this is one you may have heard of. So 200 years ago, they were one of the most abundant species of birds, 3 to 5 billion birds worldwide. And sometimes they would travel in flocks that were literally 10 miles wide. And they were hunted to extinction in only 40 years. So to go from 3 to 5 billion birds to none in 40 years. This is the grizzly bear, not extinction yet, but the grizzly bear's decline. So the contraction, the pink is where it used to be, but it now isn't. The kind of tan color is where they used to be and have stayed. So basically here in a random little pocket here. And then interestingly enough, the grizzly bear has actually expanded to a place that they weren't before. Now that could be because of climate change. Maybe that's the area that is more available to them. But you can see that half of the places that we used to find grizzly bears they're no longer present. This is the gray wolf. So notice a trend how the United States has wiped these species out and Canada hasn't. But, to each their own. So that's just something to think of here. Notice that this hasn't expanded at all. You just have some persistence and a lot of contraction, a lot of places that the wolf has left. And just a little kind of comic here. My main fear is that we'll become extinct before we're discovered. There's a lot of species we haven't discovered, and they are definitely at risk of going extinct. So that's depressing. So I always, well, not always, but I often try to think of how can we be positive about this? Like what can we do about this? Because those types of things are really depressing. So this was a list that a group of students in my past has come up with. I encourage you to think of your own or look up your own. So what's something that we can do? Can we reduce the amount of trash dumped in the ocean? Can we be more aware of products that could be possibly hurting species? So, what are some things that we can do? And then also, what are some things that someone else is doing, a company or an organization? For example, the Endangered Species Act was passed to try to conserve some of those species. So you can always pause this and look at this screen if you want to read some more of what my students found, but also take some time to look up what you think you could do. What's a practical option for you, or what's a organization that's doing something about it as well. So that's it for today, and thank you.